For 10,000 years, the galaxy has been taught to kneel before the Space Marines. They are called angels of death, the Emperor's chosen, living gods clad in ceramite and faith. Statues of them tower over hive cities. Their names are spoken in prayers by people who will never see one in person. To the common citizen of the Imperium, a Space Marine is not a man, not even a soldier, he is a symbol. A promise that humanity will endure no matter how monstrous the darkness becomes. But symbols are carefully constructed things. They are polished, simplified, and cleansed of anything that might make the truth uncomfortable. The truth is this: Space Marines are not miracles. They are not blessings. They are not even truly human anymore. They are survivors of a process so brutal, so invasive, and so unforgiving that most who begin it never live long enough to scream about it. The Imperium does not advertise this. It cannot. Because the moment the lie of heroism cracks, what spills out is not inspiration, but horror. From the outside, a Space Marine looks like perfection given form. Massive, unyielding, unstoppable. Every movement deliberate, every blow fatal. But beneath the armor, beneath the rituals and the prayers, there is a body that has been violated in ways no baseline human could endure. A body that has been cut open, reshaped, reinforced, and overridden by organs that were never meant to coexist. Each enhancement is spoken of as a gift. Each one is praised as a holy augmentation. Yet none of them come without cost, and that cost is paid in pain, identity, and the slow erasure of what once made the aspirant a person. The Imperium tells its people that Space Marines are chosen because they are worthy. Stronger, braver, more loyal than others. What it does not say is that worthiness is irrelevant once the process begins. Strength does not protect you when your bones begin to grow too fast for your flesh. Courage means nothing when your body is forced to accept organs that fight against your own biology. Loyalty cannot save you when your mind fractures under sensations no human nervous system was designed to handle. At that point, survival becomes the only virtue that matters. Heroism, in the Imperium, is a narrative designed for those who will never see behind the curtain. It is easier to call Space Marines angels than to admit they are engineered weapons, tools made from children who were never given a real choice. It is easier to worship them than to ask what it takes to build something that can survive the horrors of the 41st millennium. Because asking that question leads to answers the Imperium would rather burn than record. Every Space Marine carries his suffering silently. Not because he is above pain, but because pain is constant. It is stitched into his muscles, embedded in his bones, pulsing through his blood with every heartbeat, sometimes two. The organs inside him do not simply enhance him, they dominate him. They change how he feels hunger, fear, exhaustion, and even memory. Over time, they blur the line between instinct and obedience, between survival and slaughter. The result is a being who can fight forever, but who no longer remembers what it meant to live. This is the first lie of the Space Marines, that they are heroes created to protect humanity. The truth is darker. They are sacrifices, living ones, offered up so the Imperium can continue for one more day. Their bodies are not temples, they are battlegrounds where human biology loses, again and again, to something harsher, colder, and more efficient. And once the transformation begins, there is no victory condition. There is only endurance. Because long before a Space Marine faces the enemies of mankind, he must first survive the most terrifying enemy of all. What? The Imperium turns him into. Before a Space Marine ever feels the weight of armor or hears the roar of bolt guns, his story begins in a place far removed from glory. It begins in fear, in hunger, in worlds where survival itself is already a daily act of violence. The Imperium does not recruit its greatest warriors from comfort or safety. It hunts for them in the harshest environments imaginable, feral worlds, death worlds, hive slums where childhood ends the moment it begins. Because only those already shaped by brutality are considered capable of surviving what comes next. To the outside observer, selection is framed as an honor, a divine calling. Families are told their sons have been chosen by destiny itself. But the reality is far colder. Selection is not about potential, it is about expendability. The Imperium needs bodies that can be broken and reforged, and it looks for candidates who will not be missed if they fail. Children are taken young, before identity fully forms, before memories can harden into something that resists erasure. By the time they understand what is happening, it is already too late to refuse. The trials begin almost immediately. Physical tests that push young bodies beyond sane limits. Psychological ordeals designed not to inspire courage, but to strip away weakness. Aspirants are starved, isolated, hunted, and forced to fight each other, not for honor, but for permission to continue existing. Many die here, quietly, unrecorded. Their names are never carved into stone or spoken in prayer. They are simply deemed unworthy and discarded, their deaths considered an acceptable cost of doing business. Those who survive quickly learn a terrifying truth: this is not training. It is filtration. The Imperium is not trying to build them up, it is trying to see who does not break when everything familiar is taken away. Compassion is treated as a flaw. Hesitation is a liability. Bonds formed between aspirants are encouraged only so they can later be severed, teaching a lesson that will echo throughout their new lives. Attachment leads to weakness, and weakness leads to death. And yet, despite the suffering, many aspirants cling to hope. Hope that the pain has meaning. Hope that enduring this nightmare will grant them purpose, power, even freedom from the misery they were born into. This is the most cruel part of all. The Imperium allows that hope to exist, because hope keeps them compliant. It keeps them moving forward, step by step, deeper into a process that will soon make survival itself feel like a punishment. If you stay until the very end of this video, you'll discover why this early suffering is considered the kind part of becoming a space marine, and why everything that follows makes these trials look merciful by comparison. Because selection is not the moment a boy becomes a warrior. It is the moment his humanity is quietly placed on a countdown. Once selection ends, the aspirants are no longer viewed as children, recruits, or even people. They become subjects, assets, biological stock destined for a process that has not meaningfully changed in 10,000 years, not because it is perfect, but because the Imperium does not care enough to make it kinder. This is the point of no return. The place where survival is no longer about strength or willpower, but about whether the human body can endure being systematically dismantled and rebuilt while still conscious enough to obey. The surgeries are not performed in hospitals. They are conducted in sanctified chambers that feel more like tombs than places of healing. Incense burns constantly, not to comfort the patient, but to mask the smell of blood and cauterized flesh. Tech priests chant binaric prayers as blades cut into living bodies, treating agony as an acceptable side effect rather than a problem to be solved. Painkillers are minimal. Anesthesia is often withheld entirely. Suffering, after all, is believed to strengthen faith. The first incisions are small, almost deceptive. A cut here, a puncture there, but each opening of the flesh is symbolic. With every procedure, the aspirant's body is declared insufficient as it is. Human biology is no longer sacred, it is flawed, temporary, and in need of correction. Organs are inserted not because the body wants them, but because the Imperium demands results. And the body, whether it accepts that demand or not, must adapt or die. Rejection is common, very common. The immune system, still clinging desperately to its original purpose, attacks the foreign organs invading its territory. Fevers spike. Seizures rack young bodies strapped to metal slabs. Some aspirants die screaming, their systems overwhelmed by the very enhancements meant to save them. Others survive, but only after days or weeks of delirium, drifting in and out of consciousness while their bodies wage an internal war they were never meant to fight. Those who live through this phase often describe it later as a kind of living dissection. Not because they remember every moment clearly, but because fragments of sensation never truly fade. The pressure of hands holding them down. The sound of bone saws. The moment they realize their pain is irrelevant to the people surrounding them. This is when many aspirants first understand the truth. No one here is trying to save them. The goal is not their comfort, or even their survival as individuals. The goal is to see what remains when everything unnecessary is burned away. As the days pass and the surgeries continue, the body begins to feel unfamiliar. Organs beat at new rhythms. Muscles twitch involuntarily. Sensations come from places that never existed before. Sleep becomes fragmented and shallow, haunted by flashes of pain and half-remembered voices chanting litanies over open flesh. Even those who endure without complication begin to feel a creeping sense of alienation, as if their own bodies have become hostile environments they are merely occupying. This is the moment when many aspirants lose their last illusion. The process is not about improvement. It is about domination. The Imperium is asserting control over biology itself, forcing the human form to comply with a vision of war that has no room for fragility, hesitation, or mercy. Each implanted organ is a declaration that what came before was insufficient, and that whatever survives afterward will no longer belong to itself. Because once the flesh has been opened and rewritten, the aspirant is no longer preparing to become something greater. He is learning how to live as something else entirely. The implantation of the second heart is spoken of in reverent tones by the Imperium, as if redundancy were a blessing rather than a warning. Two hearts mean greater endurance, greater resilience, greater resistance to trauma. On paper, it is a triumph of bioengineering. In reality, it is the moment when a space marine's relationship with death becomes permanently distorted. Because from this point onward, the body does not simply survive injuries, it defies them, often violently, and never without consequence. The second heart is not added gently. The chest is opened, ribs forced apart, and the new organ is seated alongside the original like an intruder claiming shared territory. For a time, neither heart knows how to coexist with the other. They beat out of sync, competing for dominance, flooding the body with surges of pressure that feel like internal explosions. Aspirants describe the sensation as drowning while awake, lungs filling, vision narrowing, consciousness slipping and snapping back again as the hearts struggle to agree on a rhythm. When synchronization finally occurs, it does not bring relief. It brings intensity. Every pulse feels heavier, louder, more aggressive. Blood moves through the body like a weaponized substance, driving oxygen and hormones at levels never meant for a human nervous system. Emotions spike without warning. Rage arrives fully formed, without buildup. Calm becomes shallow and temporary. Even moments of rest are haunted by the relentless thudding inside the chest, two engines that never truly slow down. There are those who claim the second heart makes space marines fearless. That is another lie. Fear still exists, but it is drowned beneath a flood of physical dominance. The body reacts before the mind can intervene. Pain becomes information rather than deterrent. Wounds that should cause collapse instead trigger a violent surge of strength, forcing the marine forward even as his original heart would have failed. This is not bravery. It is enforced momentum. Over time, many space marines come to resent the second heart. It denies them the release of exhaustion. It refuses to let them fully rest. Even in sleep, it hammers away, keeping the body in a state of constant readiness. Some Marines report waking from dreams convinced they are still in combat, fists clenched, hearts racing in tandem as if responding to threats that no longer exist. The line between battlefield and memory begins to blur. There are darker consequences as well, ones rarely spoken of. When one heart is damaged but not destroyed, the other compensates, forcing the body to continue functioning while trauma accumulates. Internal bleeding can go unnoticed. Organs can fail quietly. The Marine keeps fighting, unaware that his survival is now built on borrowed time. In this way, the second heart does not prevent death. It postpones it, often until the moment is far more catastrophic. This is the cruel genius of the design. The Imperium does not want warriors who know when to stop. It wants warriors who advance until they physically cannot continue, and even then, sometimes still do. The second heart ensures that retreat feels unnatural, that collapse feels like betrayal, that survival is measured not by well-being, but by how long the body can be forced to obey. And with two hearts beating inside his chest, a Space Marine learns an early, irreversible lesson. Death is no longer something that happens to him. It is something his body must be convinced to allow. After the hearts, after the blood and the pain that teaches the body to refuse death, the transformation moves deeper. It reaches the structure that defines shape, movement, and identity itself. The ossmodula does not simply strengthen bones. It rewrites them, and it does so with a cruelty that no amount of discipline can truly prepare an aspirant for. The implantation begins quietly, almost deceptively. A small organ placed near the neck, close to the spinal column, where it can influence growth hormones and skeletal development. At first, there is little sensation. Then the aching starts. A deep, crawling pressure that feels like something is pushing outward from the inside, testing the limits of flesh and bone. This is not pain that flares and fades. It is pain that grows. Bones lengthen, thicken, reshape themselves according to a template that does not care about comfort or symmetry. Joints stretch beyond natural limits. The spine compresses and extends in cycles that leave aspirants gasping, muscles spasming as the skeleton beneath them refuses to stay still. Growth is not gradual. It comes in violent surges, often during sleep, when the body's defenses are lowest. Many wake screaming, convinced their limbs are breaking apart. In a sense, they are. The Imperium celebrates this stage. Height increases are carefully measured. Density is tested. Strength potential is calculated. But what the records rarely mention is how many aspirants lose mobility during this phase. Hips that never align properly, shoulders that grind painfully under unnatural mass, fingers that grow too thick to move with precision. Those deemed too damaged are quietly removed from the process. Their bodies are failures. Their suffering is irrelevant. For those who endure, the ossmodula leaves permanent reminders of its work. Bones ache even after growth stabilizes. Weather changes trigger pain deep within the marrow. Old fractures never fully feel like they belong to the body again. Movement becomes powerful but heavy, each step carrying the weight of something built for war rather than life. The aspirant begins to realize that his body is no longer optimized for living in the world, it is optimized for breaking it. There is also a subtler loss that occurs here. Proportion changes. Familiar gestures feel wrong. The body no longer matches the mental image the aspirant still carries of himself. Mirrors become unsettling. Limbs look too long, too thick, too angular. It is a quiet but profound form of alienation, the realization that even if he survived everything else, he could never truly go back to who he was. The ossmodula ensures that a Space Marine can withstand impacts that would pulp a normal human. But it also ensures that fragility is replaced with rigidity, both physical and psychological. Flexibility, of body and of thought, becomes harder to maintain. Adaptation gives way to endurance. Subtlety gives way to force. By the time the bone growth finally stabilizes, the aspirant stands taller, broader, heavier than any baseline human. He is stronger, unquestionably. But strength has come at a cost that will never be fully repaid. His skeleton is no longer a natural framework, it is a weaponized foundation, locked into a form designed for endless conflict. And as the pain fades into a constant, familiar ache, the aspirant learns another truth of becoming a Space Marine. The body does not ask who you want to be. It decides, and you live with the consequences. Once the skeleton has been reforged into something capable of bearing impossible weight, the transformation turns outward again, wrapping that weaponized frame in flesh designed not for grace but for domination. The biscopea is implanted deep within the chest, near the heart, where it can flood the body with growth hormones and trigger muscle development on a scale no human body was ever meant to sustain. This is the stage where raw strength becomes unavoidable, and where control begins to slip. At first, the changes feel empowering. Muscles thicken rapidly, swelling beneath the skin until the body feels dense and heavy with potential. Lifting becomes effortless. Resistance loses meaning, but this growth does not come with patience. Muscle fibers knit themselves tighter and thicker, often faster than tendons can adapt. The result is a body that feels perpetually wound too tight, like a machine operating just short of catastrophic failure. Aspirants experience constant tension. Even at rest, muscles twitch and flex, responding to surges of chemical signals they no longer consciously command. Relaxation becomes difficult, then rare. Sleep is shallow and restless, interrupted by spasms and involuntary movements that leave bodies sore and exhausted despite their enhanced endurance. The irony is cruel. The stronger the body becomes, the harder it is to truly rest within it. Fine motor control suffers. Fingers thicken. Grip strength increases to the point where restraint becomes an act of discipline rather than instinct. Simple actions, handling delicate objects, modulating pressure, even standing still, require conscious effort. Many aspirants break things without meaning to. Some injure others during training not out of malice, but because their bodies respond with disproportionate force before their minds can intervene. Emotion becomes tied to muscle memory. Anger triggers strength spikes. Stress tightens the body like a drawn blade. Over time, physical readiness and aggression blur together. The aspirant learns that calm feels weak, and tension feels powerful. This is not taught explicitly, it is learned through repetition, through the subtle rewards of survival and success. The body trains the mind as much as the mind trains the body. There are those who come to fear their own reflexes. Sudden noises provoke explosive reactions. Startled responses are amplified into acts of violence before thought can catch up. The Biscopeia does not simply enhance muscles, it rewires the relationship between stimulus and response. The change reveals itself the first time an aspirant is injured after implantation. A cut does not bleed the way it should. Instead, the wound tightens almost instantly, flesh pulling together with alarming speed. It feels less like healing and more like being stitched shut from the inside. Heat blooms around the injury. Pressure builds. Pain spikes sharply, then settles into a dense, throbbing ache as scar tissue forms with brutal efficiency. Over time, wounds stop feeling like injuries and start feeling like violations that the body responds to with overwhelming force. Bones knit together too fast, sometimes misaligned. Muscle fibers seal themselves rigidly, reducing flexibility. Scar tissue accumulates, thick and numb, replacing sensation with durability. Aspirants quickly learn that being wounded no longer teaches caution, it teaches acceptance. There is a cost to this kind of regeneration. The body prioritizes closure over restoration. Fine sensation is often lost around healed areas. Touch becomes dull. Pain becomes generalized rather than precise. As scars multiply, the body grows increasingly unfamiliar, sections of it reduced to deadened patches that respond to commands but offer little feedback in return. Psychologically, this changes how the aspirant relates to harm. Injury loses its emotional weight. The fear that once accompanied being cut, burned, or pierced fades, not because the mind grows brave, but because the body no longer reacts the same way. This creates a subtle, dangerous detachment. Damage becomes routine. Violence becomes mundane. The Imperium praises this resilience. Records note survival rates, recovery times, battlefield readiness. What they do not record is the creeping loss of intimacy with one's own body. The aspirant begins to feel less like a living organism and more like a self-repairing mechanism. Pain no longer carries meaning, it is simply another system response. In extreme cases, Marines report a strange, hollow sensation after major injuries heal. As if something was taken along with the damage. Sensation dulled, memory blurred. The body continues to function perfectly, but the person inside feels incrementally smaller, further removed from the physical shell carrying him forward. The Luraman's organ ensures that a space marine can survive wounds that would kill almost anyone else. But survival, in this context, is stripped of comfort. Healing is no longer a return to wholeness, it is a forced closure, a denial of the body's right to process trauma naturally. And so the aspirant learns yet another truth of his transformation. When healing becomes automatic and merciless, the body stops asking whether it should survive. It simply insists that it must. The Omophagea is among the most insidious of the implants, for it does not merely alter the body, it infiltrates the mind. At first, the aspirant may not understand the full extent of what has been added to him. It is framed as a tool for survival: consume the flesh of a fallen enemy, and gain their strength, their instincts, their skills. On paper, it is a practical augmentation. In reality, it is a psychological and emotional minefield that few survive without lasting scars. When the organ is active, the act of consumption becomes far more than nourishment. It is an absorption of experience, an unwanted intimacy with death itself. The aspirant begins to perceive fragments of the memories tied to the flesh, the fear before death, the final thoughts, the regrets and confessions whispered to no one. These are not passive echoes. They are intrusive, vivid, and persistent. Aspirants often report hearing voices at night, replaying moments they never lived, screaming events they could not forget. This is not merely an emotional burden. It is a theft of identity. Every time the Omophagea absorbs a new memory, the aspirant risks losing part of his own sense of self. Over time, the cumulative effect is profound. Layers of alien consciousness press against the mind, and the aspirant begins to wonder which thoughts are his own. The organ creates a mental palimpsest, old ideas overridden by memories that do not belong, yet cannot be dismissed. Some space marines embrace this gift as power. Others recoil in horror, haunted by experiences they were never meant to understand. But the Imperium encourages the organ's use relentlessly. Every kill, every battlefield casualty, becomes a chance to strengthen a marine, ensuring that victory is inseparable from psychological torment. The line between strategic enhancement and torture blurs, and the aspirant learns that survival now depends on enduring internal chaos as well as external threat. There is also an insidious moral cost. The body can adapt to consumption, but the mind cannot entirely shield itself from the emotional weight of absorbing a life in fragments. Guilt, empathy, and revulsion are natural responses, but the Omophagea diminishes them, replacing them with a cold efficiency. A marine may feel remorse for only a moment before the organ asserts itself, forcing them to act again, consume again, survive again. Humanity, if it remains at all, becomes a whisper drowned beneath layers of acquired lives. By the time the Omophagea is fully integrated, the aspirant has learned a terrifying lesson: strength and knowledge are inseparable from suffering and loss. Every bite, every memory absorbed, carries the cost of further alienation from self. What was meant to ensure dominance has also guaranteed haunting, subtle erosion of identity. And in that moment, he understands an essential truth about being transformed into a space marine. Power is inseparable from pain, and survival comes at the cost of never truly being your own. As the transformation continues, the body's internal defenses are pushed to extremes. The multi-lung and preomner are implanted to allow a space marine to breathe in atmospheres no human could endure, worlds soaked in toxic gases, corridors filled with corrosion, battlefields choked with smoke and chemical agents. On paper, these organs are miracles of engineering, ensuring survival where others would fall within moments. But survival, like all gifts in the Imperium, comes with a hidden cost. The changes begin subtly. Breathing becomes mechanically efficient, almost automatic. Oxygen and toxins alike are processed at unnatural speed. The body no longer signals danger in the way it should. Smoke, poison, and acid air no longer trigger instinctive retreat. The aspirant learns to endure environments that would suffocate anyone else, but this endurance rewires perception itself. What should feel hazardous becomes normal. What should provoke caution becomes routine. The psychological consequences are profound. Marines report a strange, lingering awareness of poison in the air, a constant subconscious calculation of toxicity and survival. Their minds become attuned to death in its most silent forms. A battlefield where normal men would gasp and choke is merely another environment to traverse. And yet, with every breath of contaminated air, the memory of chemical agony lingers inside, never fully dissipating. Adaptation comes with alienation. The aspirant's senses begin to betray him in subtle ways. Pure, clean air becomes almost painful in its unfamiliarity. Simple acts like drinking water or inhaling the natural atmosphere of a hospitable world feel wrong. The body has learned a form of existence that is inhuman. Comfort is impossible, and yet the brain cannot stop craving the efficiency the organs enforce. The multi-lung Priomner teach another lesson. Survival is more than resilience. It is compliance. The body will function in extremes without complaint. The mind, however, remains tethered to memory, to fear, to instinct. The aspirant carries a permanent echo of environments that would have killed him, and those echoes are stitched into his perception of the world. No battlefield is ever truly safe. No air ever truly clean. By the end of this stage, the aspirant is no longer a human who can survive. He is a human transformed into a creature that thrives where humans would perish. He can endure, but the experience leaves its mark. The world of baseline humans, their fragile comforts and predictable dangers, begins to feel alien. The Marine walks among them, yet part of him exists in environments no normal human could survive, and cannot forget the cost of that survival. And in that realization, the aspirant learns the unsettling truth of becoming a space marine. To breathe is no longer to live. It is to persist, unceasing, unfeeling, and inescapably aware of the poison that shapes you from within. After the lungs have been rewritten to endure poison, the transformation extends to perception itself. The oculobe and Lyman's ear are implanted to sharpen sight and hearing beyond human limits. On paper, these organs are enhancements, tools that grant awareness and precision. In practice, they are a form of sensory torture, a relentless amplification of every stimulus that the human mind is ill-equipped to process. At first, the changes are thrilling. Colors sharpen. Movements previously imperceptible leap into awareness. Sounds previously ignored now stand out, each whisper and footstep catalogued with painful clarity. The aspirant can track distant targets, detect subtle changes in terrain, hear the faintest approach of an enemy. These enhancements are celebrated as proof that the Space Marine is becoming more than human, but the reality is far darker. The brain struggles to keep pace with the influx of information. Every noise, every shift of light, every distant vibration is processed simultaneously. It is impossible to ignore, impossible to shut off. A gust of wind becomes a chorus of potential threats. A dripping pipe in a ruined hall becomes a flood of auditory signals demanding attention. Even in silence, the mind conjures phantom sounds and movements, creating an ever-present tension that never fully dissipates. Sleep becomes elusive. Even when eyes are closed and the body rests, the organs remain alert. Micro-movements, faint sounds, and subtle changes in light trigger unconscious reactions. Aspirants report nightmares filled not with fantasy, but with sharpened perception turned against them. Every shadow, every echo, every heartbeat magnified to unbearable extremes. The sensory organs force the mind to remain partially awake, partially alert, even in supposed rest. Isolation and sensory overload combine to erode patience, tolerance, and, eventually, sanity. What was once subtle becomes overwhelming. Normal conversations feel cluttered. Ordinary streets feel chaotic. Spaces designed for human comfort feel claustrophobic and hostile. The aspirant learns that being alive is no longer about what he can see or hear, it is about what he cannot unsee and cannot unhear. And yet, the Imperium regards this as progress. A space marine must perceive enemies before they strike. He must detect threats invisible to ordinary humans. Efficiency is worshipped above comfort, endurance above peace. The aspirant's mind becomes a battlefield in its own right, constantly processing, cataloging, reacting, never resting, never silent. By the end of this stage, the aspirant realizes a chilling truth. The human senses, once a source of connection and understanding, have become instruments of torment. To see, to hear, to feel is no longer to live fully. It is to endure ceaselessly, aware of dangers both real and imagined, in a world that will never again feel safe. The final stage of transformation approaches with the implantation of the Susan membrane, an organ designed to suspend life at the edge of death, preserving the body when injury or trauma should have ended it. On paper, it is a marvel, a safeguard ensuring that the Space Marine can survive injuries that would annihilate any other human. In practice, it is a form of conscious imprisonment, a silent torment in which the body and mind are forced to experience suspended agony. When activated, the Susan membrane allows the aspirant to fall into a state of near death without actually dying. Organs slow, blood flow diminishes, and the body becomes nearly inert. But the mind remains acutely aware. Time stretches in distorted loops. Seconds feel like hours, minutes like days. A wound that should have ended everything instead becomes a crucible of consciousness. Every heartbeat that barely pulses through the body becomes a reminder of the fragility that has been stripped away, replaced by the cold efficiency of artificial survival. This suspended state teaches fear in a way nothing else can. The body fights to maintain life automatically, muscles tensing, veins thrumming, yet the aspirant cannot act. He cannot escape. He cannot respond. Death is within reach, yet denied. It is a liminal space between life and oblivion, a limbo designed not for comfort or mercy, but for endurance. Many aspirants lose their grip on reality during these periods, memories blending with imagined sensations, the mind forced to confront the raw calculus of survival while the body lies inert. Recovery from Susan stasis is jarring. When the organ deactivates, the body surges back to life with violent intensity. The heart races. Blood pumps with unnatural force. Muscles twitch involuntarily, and the mind reels from the suspension it endured. Some aspirants describe it as waking from a dream of endless screams, where every nerve was acutely aware of vulnerability yet utterly powerless to respond. The experience leaves permanent marks, heightened vigilance, lingering paranoia, and an unshakable understanding that the body is no longer wholly under one's control. Through repeated use, the Susan membrane conditions the Space Marine for extremes beyond human comprehension. Injury no longer prompts instinctive retreat. Death no longer provides finality. The aspirant becomes conditioned to continue, to endure, to fight even when every system within him screams for release. The organ removes choice, replaces it with automatic survival, and in doing so, reinforces the Imperium's ultimate lesson. Life is not for comfort, or reflection, or peace. Life is for service, and service can never end. By the end of this stage, the aspirant begins to understand the terrifying implication of his transformation. He is alive, but only because death has been denied. Freedom has been taken. Autonomy has been stripped. And the very organ that keeps him breathing will ensure that he endures long past the point where mercy would have arrived. The final, most insidious augmentation comes with the implantation of the Black Carapace. Unlike previous organs, which enhance strength, endurance, or survival, the Black Carapace transforms the body into a living interface, a neural bridge between flesh and ceramite. Armor is no longer external. It becomes an extension of the Marine's very being. Where once the body moved naturally, now every gesture, every motion, is tied to a system designed for killing efficiency. The process is invasive beyond comprehension. The nervous system is melded with biocircuitry, sensory nodes, and control fibers that allow the wearer to command powered armor as if it were a second skin. Movement, reflex, and sensation are amplified, synchronized with the machine. The aspirant can feel the weight of armor plating, the recoil of weapons, even the temperature of the battlefield as though it were a part of himself. Pain, too, is transmitted differently. Armor crushes, weapons tear, yet the body integrates these sensations as information rather than injury. There is no turning back. Once the black carapace is implanted, the line between man and machine ceases to exist. The Marine no longer walks in armor, he is the armor. Movements are precise, deliberate, inhumanly coordinated. Reflexes anticipate threats before thought can process them. Efficiency becomes instinctual. And yet, beneath this perfection lies a subtle, persistent horror. The mind and body are no longer separate entities. Autonomy is gradually eroded. Choice becomes an illusion. Action is dictated as much by the organ as by the individual. This integration has profound psychological effects. The Marine feels a constant tension between instinct and will. Sensory feedback from the armor is relentless. Every micro-movement, every pressure point, every environmental fluctuation is transmitted directly into the nervous system. Sleep is shallow, dreams are invaded by the ceaseless awareness of mechanical and biological systems fused together. Even when off the battlefield, the body remembers combat, remembers the interface, remembers the demands of survival that are now inseparable from self. The Imperium calls this a triumph. A space marine is perfect, unbreakable, unstoppable. But the reality is far more sinister. By merging mind, body, and machine so completely, the Imperium ensures that the Marine will obey without question, will endure without hesitation, and will fight without fear. Humanity, if it remains at all, exists only in echoes, the faintest memory of choice, of vulnerability, of being alive before the organs and the armor rewrote every signal the body once understood. By the end of this stage, the aspirant faces the final truth of his transformation. He is no longer a man commanding tools. He is a weapon fused with flesh, bone, and steel. And in every moment, he serves the Imperium not because he chooses to, but because his body, his mind, and every organ within him have been rewritten to make obedience absolute. After centuries of augmentation, the aspirant has endured more than any human should ever face. Organs that fight each other inside him. Muscles and bones that grow and strain beyond natural limits. Blood that burns while keeping him alive. Lungs that breathe poison as easily as air. Senses so sharp they punish rather than protect. Neural interfaces that bind him to armor and war. And yet, despite, or because of, all this, the mind survives. But survival comes with a price. Psychological collapse is slow, creeping, and unavoidable. The aspirant begins to feel the absence of ordinary emotions. Joy, sorrow, fear, love, these human experiences fade, replaced by calculation, aggression, and obedience. Even memories of who he once was begin to erode under the relentless assault of survival-enhancing organs. He may recall his childhood, his family, his home, but those memories feel distant, fragile, almost alien. He begins to see himself as a vessel, a tool designed for a singular purpose, to fight, endure, and obey. Nightmares become constant companions. The mind replays every surgery, every augmentation, every pain-laden lesson learned from flesh and bone. But unlike before, the memory is no longer fleeting. It is persistent, layered, and intertwined with the present. The aspirant hears the screams of others, not just as echoes of history, but as living voices inside him, reminders of the lives consumed, the suffering endured, and the humanity left behind. Anger and rage are no longer emotions, they are chemical imperatives. They rise from deep within, triggered by stimuli the Marine may not even consciously recognize. Calm is difficult to achieve. Reflection is dangerous. The body is a weapon, the mind a battlefield, and there is no respite from either. Even victory carries a burden. The Marine cannot feel triumph as a human might. He only experiences survival, efficiency, and the echoing weight of endless duty. Isolation is another cruel consequence. No ordinary human can endure the sensory, physical, and psychological extremes that define a space marine. Interaction with civilians, peers, or even other Marines who are differently augmented becomes fraught. Communication is filtered through perception that is too acute, reflexes that are too fast, and understanding that is too alien. Loneliness is unavoidable,